Well, welcome everyone to the Dad Central Show. I am your host today, Drew Solon, and you'll notice that I am without my co-host, Ed, which he's just not available, but we're looking forward to a great conversation. One of the things I said earlier on this year was that transitions, the transition into fatherhood was an area that I wanted to focus on this year. And, I think the reason being is that transitions just in general can be very challenging. And when we make these big life changes, sometimes we feel lost, a little bit uncertain, and we can really actually, almost feel like we're going backwards. And so, certainly, with the transition to fatherhood, there's a lot that's going on. There's a lot happening, and the value of being able to know how to make that transition well, I think, is very helpful. Not only for you as a father, you as a partner, but especially for your role, just yourself as a man. And so, I'm really excited because today we're going to be talking with Amar Lohana, and he founded the Toronto Dads Group in 2017 when he became a stay-at-home dad, probably a significant transition. So, from one stay at home dad looking to connect to other dads, Toronto Dads Group has grown to a community of over 500 fathers who network, socialize, have fun, learn, and support each other as they navigate parenthood. And so, this group is part of the larger City Dads Group network, and they've got chapters in most major metropolitan areas in the United States and in Eastern Canada. So, in addition to Amar's work with the Toronto Dads Group, he founded a he's going to have to correct me if I don't get this right. Aquilo Media. It's a documentary film production company that he founded in 2020. So through Aquilo Media, he creates thought-provoking films that explore important social and cultural issues. Prior to moving to Toronto, Amar worked for 15 years in technology and finance in New York City, and he's a father of two. So Amar, welcome to the show. Really excited to learn more about your story and see what we can glean about supporting fathers in transition.
Well, thanks so much for having me on here. You have a great show, and I really appreciate this platform to talk about my experience and the group and all things fatherhood.
Oh, well, great. Thanks so much, Amar. We typically like to start the show by getting a little bit of the backstory, right? You've got your experiences, you've got the things that you've done, and obviously becoming a father, uh, hence the Dad Central show, is important. But we really like to get that again. That where did things start for you? So, why don't you take us back to the early years? What was life like for you growing up?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my family immigrated to the United States in the late '70s. I was the first member of my family to be born in America. They came from Pakistan, and yeah, I mean, for the most part, it was a very happy childhood. I mean, we sort of had a very typical immigrant situation. My mom was a stay at home, very involved in the kids, and my dad was very not involved in the kids. He sort of brags these days that he's bragging or confessing that he's never changed a diaper in his life. He's never bottle fed a kid or done any of that stuff. Um, so it was sort of a bit typical in that sense. My dad went to work. My mom stayed home and take care of the house for the most part. They did run a business together for a while, so there was that. Yeah, I mean, it was yeah, I think a typical suburban upbringing in suburban Massachusetts and then New Jersey for a bit. Um, so yeah, I think it was I think in terms of fatherhood, I think I learned a lot from my dad in terms of, honesty and integrity. Um, he's definitely the type of guy who lives by his word. And whether it's business or work or personal relationships, he's um, you know, just sort of honesty and integrity was always a really important uh, uh, part for him, I think, to impart onto his kids. But it was mostly by example. I would say, he wasn't necessarily the guy to type sort of sit down and have a conversation with you about something. It was mostly, the lessons I got from my dad were definitely from watching him, not necessarily, having conversations with him about things. And so, yeah, I mean, he was a very handy guy, so he would just, we would spend all weekend fixing things around the house. Um, he'd changed his oil in his own car. all that kind of stuff. So I think he really wanted to like teach his kids, this sort of hands-on stuff on how to um, deal with day-to-day life, but also just to not be afraid to get your hands dirty, not be afraid to work hard, and to do it with integrity. Yeah. So I think there was very important lessons from my father growing up, um, in terms of that. But it was, um, I would say it's not the most emotional or communicative relationship, right? I joke with people that I've had more conversations with my 6-year old than my dad has actually had with me directly. It's kind of like and I love him, and we have a great relationship now. We still don't talk very much, but we have a great relationship. It's sort of like throughout my entire life, it was very funny. It was like I would tell my dad I'm doing something, and he would just be like, "Yeah, okay." And then I would hear like 6 months later from some other relative, like, "Oh, your dad couldn't stop talking about all the things you're up to." And so it was, like I know that he's proud of me and appreciates me, and but it's not like the communication barrier has always been very challenging. I think growing up, yeah, I was sort of like very stoic and quiet, and don't dad's home from work, don't bother him. He's with the TV or the paper, and so yeah, but so yeah, that was sort of just growing up, and then sort of my view of fatherhood as a kid was very sort of 1950s typical. Dads go to work and uh, come home, and you bring them the paper, and you don't bug them with So yeah, I think that was and I think that's you know a lot of those lessons I carry on and try to teach to my kids, but I think I do it in a very different way than he did it. Um, but you know yeah.
That's great. Thanks so much for giving us that inside look into that interesting experience. So I would imagine just the transition. You said you were the first one in your family that was born in the United States, so maybe you didn't have that transition, but they certainly did. But then hearing the values that he instilled in you, all right, and you talked about the integrity, the work ethic, and that I'm going to use it as finding a way. Right, he was resourceful. And you had something to fix, he'd find a way to fix it. But then you also talked a little bit about the communication and or lack thereof. So I'm just curious, is that something that while you were growing up, you felt it was a challenge, or is that something more as you've grown, become a father yourself, that you started to think back and reflect on it and notice the differences?
Um, yeah, I don't think I really had a sense of it as a kid. It was just the way things were. I did not. It didn't. Yeah, I didn't really reflect on it that much. But it's certainly when I had kids and I started to sort of interact and grow with them, I realized how different um, sort of my way of parenting was from my dad, and and then I did begin to reflect on it a little bit more, and maybe get uh, a little bit resentful, I guess, maybe as after that I was wondering why can't we have more of an emotional relationship? Why can't we? I don't you know my dad's the guy I sort of talk to when I want to give him a update on business and professional stuff, not on how I'm feeling. Um, and so yeah, I don't think it really like I did not really reflect on it growing up, but becoming a dad and going through that, I think I've reflected a lot more on my relationship with my father.
Hmm.
Um, and I've also reflected more on how he sort of lived by, like, he was trying to teach us things by showing by example, and so I think that was, I've also grown to appreciate that more, in terms of how hard it was for him as an immigrant dad, to be in a totally different environment than what he grew up in, um, and to be dealing with kids who had a very different experience than he did. And different values. I think growing up in America, you definitely pick up different values than uh, if you're growing up in Pakistan, in a very over there, it's a very sort of joint family situation. Parents don't, I mean, when my dad was growing up, he his amazing stories. I mean, his parents had 5 kids and they didn't really pay any attention to them. The kids just like went off and did whatever. I mean, he said he broke his arm one day and he didn't tell anybody for a couple of days. He just kind of like suffered through it, um, until somebody noticed, like, oh, he's not using his arm. Maybe we should take him to the doctor. So it was so I mean, I can sort of like understand where he's coming from in a way, because that's the way that he grew up. People just sort of grew up in this large joint family with lots of people around, and nobody really paid attention to any individual kid or their what they were up to, very much at all. They was just sort of like big family, and everyone's just thrown in together, and the kids just go off and do whatever they're going to do. So yeah, I do appreciate that. He had a big transition coming to America, to try and make a better life for his family, because we are a religious minority in Pakistan, and it was it's not super safe over there, and so he was trying to make something here for us, and yeah, and he had to deal with a lot of things that I don't think he really uh, uh, you know had to as a kid, or thought that's the way fatherhood or parenthood was going to be for him. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I think there's so much just involved in that, but clearly, he worked hard, and he tried to model for you and how to show up the best you can. And so, I'm curious. It's a quite a contrast, though it sounds, from your approach to fatherhood and what you're trying to instill in your family as a father. So maybe you can talk to us then about your journey to becoming a dad. And we got the question of what fears, hopes, or challenges came out, but it sounds like there's a significant difference that you are approaching fatherhood than that. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know again, I don't really know if I really thought it through that much. It's just sort of the way things sort of worked out. I think when we had our first son in 2013. I just figured that's what you do. You have kids. We got married and we had kids. We had, and that, and I look forward to having a kid, but I didn't really think through that much how much of being a father um, would sort of change everything for me. And I think, yeah. So I mean, I distinctly remember, when when my son was born, that you know, like like I just wanted to do everything for him. Like I didn't, I like there was nothing, like if he cried, I wanted to take care of him. Like I don't, like I can't imagine. Yeah, I couldn't imagine, uh, being like, you know, s- somebody else needs to do this, or I just it was just, if he's upset or crying, I would want to provide him with whatever he want. I mean, I had never before I had my son, I had never changed a diaper before. I never held a newborn infant. Like I would, if we went to the visit a newborn at a family's house, I wouldn't like pick it up because I was afraid of touching it. I was afraid of breaking it. I didn't want, the first diaper I had changed was my wife had a C-section. She was out of it. The nurse was out of the room, and he was screaming his head off. And I was like, I guess I have to do this, And I opened up the diaper and I go to do it, and then he decides to have another round right on my hand. I'm like, oh great, great. Now what do I do? And that was my first experience changing a diaper. So I mean, I don't think I really thought about it too much, or didn't take any classes or anything like that beforehand. Just sort of jumped into it, and I don't know, it was just very, very natural. I mean, in the beginning, I mean, as I said, my wife had a C-section. She was very sort of like, it took the recovery, it took a long time. I was up every night, with the baby. I was, you know, I think for both my kids, whenever like I was the one who woke up at night and took care of them. I was the one who, was at every doctor's appointment. I was the one, and I think, yeah, and I think it was a real reset with my career as well, because I was always the guy who was staying in the office till late at night. We had this ridiculous, mantra that you can't innovate working 8 hours a day. And so, this very, very sort of go-getter culture that we were going to, um, work hard, play hard. And I remember I took 3 weeks off after my son was born. And I remember going back to the office, and somebody coming by and being like, "Oh, wow, you still work here?" Like in sort of a, joking tone, but like, being like, "Where were you?" Like, and I realized that, my values had shifted. Like there was a person that, was going to be the most important thing beyond anything else in the world. And so, um, yeah, I think it was just a very it happened very quickly, I feel like, and I didn't really think about it, and but it was, it was a big change in a very short amount of time. And I don't yeah, I have not read any parenting books. I have not read any, that's not my thing. But I just really enjoyed being a dad. I don't know. It
Mhm.
was, it was a very fulfilling experience, and everything else sort of just like didn't seem as important. And yeah.
Yeah, well, it's interesting just to hear your story of that transition, right? And it was an abrupt one, right? It went from kind of 0 to 100 overnight. And but it's also interesting to hear your response to that, in that you just jumped in. You said, "Okay," and something changed in you. And so it's amazing. I think at the end you encapsulated well. Nothing else seemed as important at that point in time. So that significant change for you, that experience prompted sounds like just some changes for you. Which, if we look at transitions or changes, there's various responses to that. And one of the things that has been said, crises, or these abrupt changes, they prompt these areas of reflection, and checking in. So, you kind of just jumped full on, didn't really have time to reflect. Just like, this is what matters to me, and I'm going to go for it. So, what was the biggest challenge for you then? Because it sounds like career focus, everything just changed. And so, can you talk about what was the challenge you then experienced in that process of things not being as important anymore?
Um, I mean, I think it was really easy in the beginning to sort of like throw myself into being a parent and then keep up with work. I think after a while, I realized I sort of like deprioritized myself as well, in a way. Like, I think that was probably a big challenge. Is after a while, I realized that I didn't really do anything for myself anymore. Is because um, and so I think that was a challenge to sort of like be like, okay, well, I need to make time for myself as well, and to make time for um you know other interests and things like that. And so I sort of had to rebalance after a while. That was a challenge. I think parenting, you know I think my wife was surprised how much I cared about things that are probably, like, you don't really hear about most dads caring about, like, you know, do we have the right bottle, or do we have the right, uh, I don't know, whatever it was. Do
Yeah,
we
the
have the right,
details. There's a lot of
you know,
details when you've got
or yeah,
a baby, right? And you got to be like, most be like, okay, whatever, you just decide. But you are very much, it sounds like, in there wanting to know, are we doing the right thing for every detail that matters for our child?
yeah. And so I think there was a lot of sort of that negotiation with my wife as to like what, you know, how to navigate this. It's a new decision making thing, like, and if I think the default is mostly, moms end up dealing with a lot of that stuff, and so dads end up not having a lot of opinions, but I did have a lot of opinions, and so we sort of had to negotiate how to figure out how to, what was important to us, and what how to sort of resolve those conflicts. I mean, both of us are, you know very passionate and caring about taking care of this child, and like we would have, you know I mean, the most ridiculous arguments about which, like, you know early reader books to buy, because I was of the opinion that, a different early reader was, the right thing for their brain development, whatever. And like we would just have the most, uh you know like you just butt heads over the silliest things. And so that was definitely a negotiation about, like, allowing her to be the parent that she needs to be, and me to be the parent that I needs to be, and giving us both space to do that. um and working through that together, sort of. I don't think there's a lot of playbooks for that. I feel like, for uh as I mentioned, just growing up, I feel like a lot of these things, there was never a negotiation or discussion in my family about, like, what, who was going to do the dishes. There was never a negotiation about who was, um in uh in charge of, you know uh the kids for the day. There was no, like, can you watch the kids for a couple hours. There was none of that. And so, like, I guess when you don't have, like, those roles are so clearly defined, there's no need for communication around it. And so that wasn't modeled for me as a kid, like communication and negotiation around these, things that we both really care about, because it was all quite delineated who was in charge of what. And so that was definitely something that, we had to figure out. I don't think, um, my wife hadn't had that either. She grew up in a very traditional immigrant household as well. And so that was something that, we had to sort of figure out. How do we negotiate, you know, um, running this household as partners rather than, separate. um, and so, yeah, I think that was a big part of, early on things that we had to sort of work through.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. So maybe in short, like, what's the one thing that helped you do that?
one thing, I mean, it's silly, but it's communication. I don't know, like,
Okay.
it's so simple, but like it's so hard sometimes. Just communicating, um, what you need and what you feel, and respecting the other person's, what they need and feel, and not, you know um, and really valuing what they're feeling. And it's, um, and then, there's, and just understanding there's no right answers. There's no playbook. Like, I mean, there's a lot of books on how on raising parents, but on raising kids, but there's no right way. There will be so many impossible decisions where there is no right decision, and you just kind of have to chart the path as best you can. And you know um, so that's, yeah, I think that
Okay.
was
No, I appreciate that. And that communication piece so crucial, but chart the path together, which is
yeah,
what I think I hear. And so charting that path for you and your wife led to some big changes. You became a stay-at-home dad, which you were in a career at the point you became a father, but ultimately you became a stay-at-home dad. Founded Toronto City Dads Group, and now I believe you're now the founder of a media company, and so you've made another transition back. So why don't you talk to us? Can you tell us about those experiences and like what going through transition, what's helped you be successful, and maybe what's been a challenge for you as you've gone through those transitions?
Yeah, I mean, so the you know, I feel like, with everything, I just really live in the moment. I don't know. I've recently, yeah, I discovered that I've been, diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, which explains a lot. But I don't really have any long-term plans in a way. Um, I just live in the moment, and the opportunity arose where my wife got an opportunity to move to Toronto and get a job, and I told her, um, sort of without thinking it through too much, that I'm happy to go to move to Canada to as long as I don't have to work in finance there. I mean, I was working in finance. I had no plans to ever leave. It's a great way to make a living in New York City. It's a you know and I was being promoted, moving up, getting raises, you know. But I always felt like there was something missing. I mean, I watched my wife; she was a journalist, and she creates amazing work, and it's meaningful. And um, my job was a great way to provide for my family, but I'm not sure I was really fulfilled. Um, and so, but if the opportunity hadn't arisen, I probably would have kept doing that. But yeah, so I told her, I will, as long as I do not have to work in finance. And my plan was that I'll just be home with the kids for a while and figure out what I want to do. And so it was, in a way, it was a pretty almost, I mean, a bit selfish in a way, that like I just didn't want to work in finance anymore. I was like, and if this is a way out, then that's great. And I didn't have any idea or plan or when I would return to the workforce. I just was like, I'm just going to do this now, and if we can, make our bills doing this, then let's do it. And so, and so we jumped at that opportunity. And so, yeah, I mean, we had just at the time, our second child is adopted, and so we had adopted her from Pakistan, and she was, um, I think when we brought her back, she was about 4 weeks old, and you know, my wife went back to work, and I was at home with a 4-week-old baby, and a 3-year-old, and it was, I think it was interesting. It was, again, just breaking out of sort of those expected roles, and I got a couple of responses from so many different responses from people. Some people were like, "Oh, this is so great and wonderful what you're doing," and they were like really like amazed and thought this was, that I was some sort of an angel. Um, and the people who didn't necessarily agree with the decision, I don't think anybody ever said it to my face, but a lot of people would just, you know, sort of side comments like, "Oh, so what are you doing for work now?" Like, you know, 3 or 6 months later, and it was like, "No, I'm still with the kids." Um, and I think there was a lot of like concern from family and other things that I had left a successful career to do something that I don't think they really valued it as much, as my successful career, just being home with the kids. Um, and I think actually, I mean, both of those responses are sort of a bit problematic. I think if you think about it, like dad, a dad being a stay-at-home dad is I think something that should be supported and normalized. But should it be celebrated? I mean, moms have been doing this forever. Like, I don't know. It's just what it's a different thing that I've done, but moms have been doing it forever. So I sort of had to stop people when they're like, "Oh, you're such an angel," I'd be like, I don't know. I don't know if anybody took my mom aside and said, "Hey, you're such an angel for," like, I mean, she was um, like so much better of a parent than I am in terms of just taking care of the house and the kids, and like nobody ever like pulled her aside and said, wow, you're such an angel, but I've gotten that so often. And so I just have to stop people and say, like, look, we have to like normalize this and support dads that want to do this, but like, I'm not an angel. I'm just a guy who wants, who, enjoys taking care of his kids. And honestly, it was a great, opportunity for me to just hit the reset button and do something different. Um, I'd say that, the hardest part about it was, um, I think when you're going through any sort of transition, it's nice to have somebody to talk to who's going through that transition, at, or has gone through it, and to like just share and talk, and like, you know, for any sort of, and even in Toronto, I mean, there's so much, you know, so many dads going on paternity leave and things like that, and taking extended paternity leave, but most of the drop-in groups you go to, most of the play groups you go to, it's moms, and I developed wonderful relationships with moms, but it's very hard to like go beyond that. You can't really like ask. It's hard to ask a mom for like, can I get your number? Can we go for a coffee? Can we go for a beer? Like, it's just not gonna, like, I mean, I'm sure that happens. I'm sure there's very wonderful platonic relationships between men and women who are primary parents, but like, it just was, like after like 6 months, I was like, it's just a bit lonely here, um and so I think that's where the genesis for the dads group came up, is I joke that it's sort of like Will Smith and I Am Legend. I just sort of set up in a particular spot, went there every week, and I put up a meetup group, and for the first 3 or 4 weeks nobody came. It was just me. um and um and eventually, one dad showed up, two dads showed up, a few more dads showed up, and dads from all over the GTA would come. They'd drive like an hour away for our weekly, dads hangout. And I could see there was a real need for it. There was other dads out there that was in this very similar situation to me, and so I think that became a real great resource for me. Um, and it's when you're going through a transition, and it's yeah, as I said, when you're going through a transition like that, just having somebody else going through with it, just to talk to, you know, um, is great. So I thought that was, and so that's sort of how the group started.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that. The idea of just having someone there who's been through a transition, whether as a sounding board or whether as someone to give advice or just to kind of connect with, sounds like that was really the what drove you. You were getting some of those experiences, but you weren't getting it with other dads. And so, I mean, I love the fact that you just said, "Well, I'm going to make it happen." And I love your "I Am Legend" reference. You can easily picture that, right? And that's you showing up, and but eventually having people come. So now that you've got City Dads going, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about like what have you found to be what other dads are coming to the group for? What are they getting from it? Because we know what it's benefiting you, but why do they come?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's such a great topic, transitions, and link to this group, because I find a lot of the dads who come out are either they're the immigrants like me, who are in a new city and didn't really know anybody and were in a new situation, um, or a lot of dads going through separations. I mean, it's like, I can imagine it's like when you um, you know it's for a lot of 30, 40-year-old men, you have like your work friends, and you have like your wife's friends or your family friends, but there's, and then you go through a separation, and suddenly you have to deal with, this and parenting, and so I think there's a lot of dads going through separation, um, a lot of gay dads as well, and so yeah, all sorts of dads are going through different transitions and situations, and I mean, we had a guy join who joined. He wasn't even a dad yet. His wife was. He was like, she was like 7 months or 8 months, and so he was like, and so he was going through that transition, and came out to one of our meetups, and I think, yeah, especially post pandemic, it's been really great. I think a lot of people are really looking for a connection and looking to meet in person, um, and connect and share, and just you know um, sort of, I mean, it's almost feels like it's starting to build a little bit of a dad tribe, like it's like,
Mm.
there's people that are, connecting with each other and supporting each other, and it's been really wonderful to see it come together.
I'm really glad to hear that. Just because I think there's such a great need. Yes, post pandemic makes sense, and we've been isolated to be able to reconnect. But then obviously in the area of fatherhood, because big part of Dad Central and what we create is the value that a positive adult father has to overall child development outcomes. So you want to have healthier, more successful, more well-adjusted, children grow into well-adjusted adults. You need to have positive involved parents. And one of those missing factors that makes a significant boost in children is when you have a positive involved father. And so the fact that fathers want to be involved, they want to be engaged, and they're coming out and getting the type of support that they need, I think it's really valuable. But I'd love to know, like, what's the greatest benefit that you've experienced from bringing dads together through City Dads, both you or the dads that are coming?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really unique place. I think, and what I've noticed recently is with the dads supporting each other, even is like, I mean, I'll give you one example is, it was one dad who was going through again a transition. His child was, I think 2 or something like that, and it was the first time they were going to daycare. And so it's like your baby that you've loved and cared for and fed and given every need, taken care of every need, and now you need to hand it over to a stranger. And we just had a little group chat with everybody, who comes out to the meetups, and he just posted like, guys, I just dropped off the kid, and I'm being, this is a bit emotional, this is hard, he was crying and whatever. And all the dads just jumped in. It was like, and just provided support. And I mean, I was really amazed to see that, and that the group is coming together like that. And I don't think there's a place like that for dads. Like, and
Mm,
so I think that was really validating for me to see that, um, my need to connect and other people's need to connect, it's just sort of come together, and it's, created this sort of very unique space. And it's amazing to like just like see that even the City Dads group all across America and stuff like that, like that this is everywhere. It's not just me, it's not just us, that that there's a lot of dads that really are want to be active and involved and informed, and they get value from connecting with other dads who are interested in that as well.
yeah, so very important. And we have heard over the almost a year of doing this show now, just the power of community for dads in general. And so you're creating that and you're experiencing that. And that's really powerful. So I want to go back to the idea of transition though. And because you have had, a front row, you've had transitions and now you're supporting, fathers who are going through transitions. And what advice would you have for anyone who's going through, or a dad who's going through a transition right now, that you think could really help them?
Um, yeah, I'd say, as I said, the best thing that helped me was to find other dads going through the same thing. Find your tribe. They're out there. The people who want to connect. I feel like there's so many stories these days of, how us middle-aged men are, if you haven't got that strong, group of guys who've stuck together since, college or whatever, like it's very hard to find that community at the age, as a middle-aged man. And so I think that, if you don't see that community out there, start building it, because there's other guys who want to be connected. Um,
You think
the,
there's
you
a
know,
risk involved though, right? It was risky what you did to just set up a meetup group, go down to a place and just have nobody show up. You kept at it, but others maybe, oh, I'm not doing that, or even risking reaching out to a group, or even going to a group. So I just, because I want to glean on your experience with it, that may not be your way, because it seems like you go after things. But what do you say to the person who's like, man, I can't do that? Like,
I
how would
was
you encourage them?
I was terrified. What do you mean?
Okay, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I was, there were so many times I just was like, nah, just, like, what am I doing here? Why, you know, um, but I was, yeah, no, I think, I was not, yeah, I'm not the sort of typical outgoing, social butterfly kind of, no. And So it was a challenge. It was a challenge. It's still, it's still is for me. I don't, it doesn't come naturally to me, to sort of host a meetup and have everybody sort of come and they're looking for me and they're coming to talk to me. It's, when I go to social events, I like to hide. I like to be in the corner, and so it's a challenge. But you know, I just, I don't know. There's there's um there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I don't know if I think it all goes back to, communication. So simple. Just having somebody to communicate to is important. But it's yeah. So I would say it's, yeah. I mean, I don't know what the right answer is for folks, but I could tell you that, I'm not great at giving advice, actually. Like, I never give parenting advice to anybody ever. I'm happy to say how it was for me and what I got through it and what resources I used and but I would never tell anybody what to do. Because I,
You
you
strike me
know,
as humble, right? And just wanting to share more from, hey, I've had this experience, but I'm not the one to tell you yes or no or how to do this. But that I see that as just a little bit of humility, and recognizing everyone's journey is slightly different, but
right.
recognizing there can still be things that you can step into that offer a lot of value. So I get that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, how about we do this? Why don't you tell people who are listening, if they want us to get involved with City Dads, say they like, you know what, I'm terrified like you were, but I really need something like this. I'm going through a transition, and the fact that there's a group here that I can connect with, I want to get involved. Where can they find out more?
Yeah. So citydadsgroup.com is the website. And all of our meetups are scheduled on meetup.com. So you could just search for your local dads group on meetup.com. We have one for in Toronto. We're doing a dads and kids learn to play Pokemon this Sunday, at a local game store. So folks can come out to that. I'm sorry, you're probably not gonna have this thing published by then. Um, I just realized, but anyways, folks can go up on meetup.com. We have monthly, in Toronto. We have monthly Dads Nights Out. We just started a new Dads Nights Out, outside, our first one outside of downtown in Port Credit, Mississauga. So there's a dad in that area that wanted to try and start up a Dads Night Out in that area. So those are just events for anybody. It's not for stay-at-home dads. It's not for specifically. It's just for any dad that wants to come out and connect with local dads. And so yeah, we host play dates. We host outings to soccer games, baseball games, stuff like that. So yeah, come check us out.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Amar. I've been um, really appreciative of your story, your experiences, and the humility that I referenced, but really a desire to still go and put yourself outside of your comfort zone and see what's coming. It sounds like you're growing. City Dads Group is growing. There's an interest, there's a desire, and there's value that everyone is getting from being part of this. So thanks so much for being on the show. Thanks so much for sharing your story. And everyone, if you haven't, check out City Dads Group and get involved wherever you can. So normally at this time, Ed and I would do a little bit of a wrap up, but I think that wrap up there was it. Find your community, find the support that you need while you're going through transition, and get involved. There's lots of opportunities. We at Dad Central, we love to get some feedback on the show and whether we're offering value for you in this dad journey. We look forward to hearing from you. So email us podcast@dadcentral.ca with your show suggestions, with your questions, with your comments and feedback. We love to get it. Of course, if you want to listen to more of our show, you can do so on our website. It is dadcentral.ca/podcast. Of course, you also can get a ton of free resources. So whether that's you are a separated divorced dad and you're figuring out how do we do this parenting thing. If you are if you are dealing with a young child and you want to understand how does play help, we've got booklets, we've got resources all at dadcentral.ca. And as always, we like to remind you that the Dad Central show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there is a positive impact. So once again, thanks so much for listening to our show. As Ed would say, remember to give yourself grace, and I don't know what else he says. He usually says something fun. So I'm going to end on that note. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you next time.